This episode is brought to you by Yumiko. Yumiko just released a multicolor plus black and white collection of leotards. Pieces feature intricate designs that can include different colors within the same panel, alternating velvet and nylon trims on different sides of the body, as well as multiple fabrics and colors on straps and necklines. Stand out in class and rehearsals with these beautiful designs that are like nothing you have ever seen before. We invite you to see these new items in person at the Yumiko store in New York City, and on December 8th, you can come see us too. We will be recording a live podcast on Saturday, December 8th at 4 p.m. at Yumiko's New York flagship boutique with special guest Juliette Doherty, star of the movie On Point. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook for more information coming soon about our live podcast on Saturday, December 8th at 4 p.m. And in the meantime, explore all of Yumiko's beautiful and personalized dancewear at yumiko.com. I'm Rebecca King-Ferraro.
And I'm Michael Breeden, and you're listening to Conversations on Dance.
Today we are joined by Miami City Ballet Artistic Director Lourdes Lopez and our former boss. Born in Havana, Cuba, and raised in Miami, Lopez began taking ballet lessons at the age of 5 and continued her training full-time at the School of American Ballet when she was 14. George Balanchine chose her to join the New York City Ballet Corps de Ballet shortly after her 16th birthday. She danced many featured roles with the company and was promoted by Balanchine to soloist in 1984, one of the last dancers he promoted. She became a principal under the direction of Peter Martins in 1984, and she retired from the stage in 1997. After retirement, she joined WNBC-TV in New York as a cultural arts reporter. She later went on to become the executive director of the George Balanchine Foundation and then co-founded the dance company Morphoses with Christopher Wheeldon in 2007. In 2012, she became the artistic director of Miami City Ballet. Lourdes has been named a nominee at this year's Dance Magazine Awards taking place in New York City on December 3rd. For more information on the Dance Magazine Awards, visit dancemagazine.com.
Lourdes, thank you so much for joining us today. We've obviously been wanting to do this for a long time, so
it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, me too.
So fun. It's so glad we can all be together here in West Palm Beach. So great. So let's just start at the beginning with your career. When did you first become aware of Balanchine and the School of American Ballet?
That would have been at the age of 10, actually, when I showed up for an audition. And they rejected me because I wasn't 12. And so I went to Joffrey for one summer, but then I re-auditioned through, I don't know if you've heard of her, Irina Kosmovska. She's a wonderful teacher out on the West Coast that would do all the summer courses at School of American Ballet. Mm-hmm. And I happened to be out on the West Coast because my sister was getting married, and I took class, and Irina actually called the school and said, you really have to take her. So at 11, I ended up with a summer scholarship to the School of American Ballet Level 1, and then they gave me a full scholarship to be able to study during the year in Miami. And that really kind of propelled me because it was, as you know, just very expensive. It's not something that people take on lightly.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah.
So what was your experience like at SAB, and then how did you come to join the company, New York City Ballet?
It was that very first year, which was 1969. I remember because it was the year of the moon landing. It was the old school on 86, not the old school, but on 86 and Broadway. And that really the first time that I saw Mr. B, because we were in level 1 and we had our name then. And it was Marjorie Bressler, I'll never forget, that was teaching class. And this man came in with Madame Urusso, and sat down there and said, that's Balanchine, that's Balanchine. But I didn't know what Balanchine was. Right. It didn't, I was 11, and it didn't make any sense to me. But really, as the summers kind of went on, I kind of started to understand what this was. New York City Ballet, School of American Ballet, there's an official school. You train here to get into that company. But it still didn't really... I have to tell you honestly, it never registered until I actually moved at the age of 14 to School of American Ballet. And my sister was working as an usherette at what was then the State Theater. Mm-hmm. And I remember the first ballet that I saw was Jules.
It's a good starter.
And I couldn't believe Diamond. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing, which was this classical ballet that was not classical ballet, the way that I had grown up. And then then Nutcracker came. Mm-hmm. And then at that point, this is it. I was hooked. Then I understood what it was and what he was and what he was doing and what it meant to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Who were some of your teachers at that time?
Oh my God, I say my generation, really, guys, I'm sorry, but I have to tell you honestly, my generation. So I had Madame Danilova, Madame Dubrovska, Madame Toomey, Muriel Stewart, Stanley, Suki, Irina Kosmovska. I had a little bit of Richard Rapp once in a while. I never had Duden. I mean, they were just these unbelievable, great teachers, a direct link to the past, just this direct link to the past.
It's interesting because you're talking about not really knowing who Balanchine was because you were little. I mean, how you don't ever understand the, gravity that he had. So what about the teachers that were there? How long did it take you till you realized oh my gosh, I'm learning from
I was that I knew right away because I was always as a kid in Miami. My teacher Martha Marr would really teach us a lot about ballet history. So I understood Diaghilev, Karsavin, of Fokine and Alonso and Firebird. I mean, and Swan Lake. So I understood the history of ballet, of classical ballet. So I knew who Danilova was, and I knew who Dubrovska was, and that I understood that these were great dancers. That and it kind of gave me a sense. Also, interestingly enough, even though I came from a strong Cuban community, kind of gave me the sense that I belonged to something else. It was really interesting that I belonged to something much bigger, much deeper, much older than even what I was doing then. That there was a connection there through these teachers.
Right.
Yeah. So how did it come about that you joined the New York City Ballet then?
It came about that I have to tell you honestly, I'd never thought that I would get in. Actually, I think they told my parents that I probably wouldn't because my feet were not great. But I don't know. He came and we did my year was the first year that Suki was teaching there and did her workshop performance. So it was Valse Fantasy, Serenade, and First Movement Stars and Stripes. And so it was the first year that Balanchine works were being performed by the workshop.
Oh, wow.
And aside from that, I was also in Madame Danilova's Sleeping Beauty. And so somebody was out. I was in the corps of Serenade. I was in the corps of Valse Fantasy, and then somebody was out 5 days before Stars, and Suki came up to me and she said, "Mr. Balanchine wants you to," Mr. Balanchine wants you to learn it, and I did it, and I think that was just the first time that I got a sense that he had somehow noticed me. I mean, where and how that happened, I have no idea. I have no idea. I have zero idea.
He didn't watch class or anything?
No, he didn't watch class. He took rehearsals of Madame Danilova's Sleeping Beauty, and I was one of the jewels. He took rehearsals. He took rehearsals of Serenade, and he took rehearsals of Valse Fantasy. Those rehearsals I distinctly remember. But it wasn't like he was on me or, it was just like, just throw her out there. Right. And then the following year I did... Paquita, the lead in Paquita. And then at that point he came in, he worked with Maria Caligari and myself who were doing it. And then there was a real kind of sense. And then we got in as an apprentice that we did for about half a year of an apprentice season. And then he's told the school, not me, he told the school, I'm not taking her and she's way too young until she graduates.
How old were you at this time?
15 and a half.
Oh my God.
Until she graduates from school. But he didn't keep his promise because I got in. I think he needed dancers and I got in. But I was already doing an advanced course. I was, they had this thing.
There.
Yeah. What was it called? Independent studies. So with Nebraska, I think it was Nebraska Lincoln or Lincoln, Nebraska, some correspondence course. So I was kind of getting there. But he gave me my diploma.
Stop it.
He did at Professional Children's School. It was his year with Ellen Bernstein. And so I danced Tarantella and he went like this.
Oh my God. Do you have a photo?
No, I don't know. No, I don't. But yeah, so I kept my promise too.
That's amazing.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
So you weren't in SAB that long then? It's only a couple
No, summer course from 11 to 14 and then 2 years.
2 years. Wow.
So what were some of those early years in the company like for you? What were your experiences as a teenager growing up in New York City Ballet?
They were a little bit, I have to tell you, Michael, they were a little bit of a mess because, you go from what I consider elementary school into the university. It's like and I was very young. And even though I had my sister with me, who was 5 years older, living with me, it's different. No one's forcing you to be in that fifth position. No one's really on you. No one's watching over you. No one's asking you questions. No one's asking how you are. How do you feel? It's very isolating, kind of, in a funny way. So I really floundered, I have to say, for about, I'd say, so I was 16. So I really floundered to about, even 18, 19, and really trying to figure out. I wasn't dancing. I mean, I was dancing the corp, run on Western and fourth movement Bizet, but I wasn't doing any of the, what I would call, like Barocco or stuff like that. And then there was somehow something just, I don't know what it was, something just changed in me. And I just said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to give it 150%. Or I'm going to leave, or I'm not going to do it because I was unhappy. Mm-hmm. And then I started taking class with David Howard. When Mr. B wasn't teaching, I'd go over to David Howard, and he was at that time over at Harkness, all the way on the east side. And either, whether it was David, whether it was me, whether it was maturity, whatever it was, but something just, and I think that's what happens with dancers. One season, something changes, and you don't know what it is, and sometimes you do. And something just changed, and it started clicking for me. I started to understand what I needed to do and how I needed to work and what that meant and what it meant in rehearsals. And then I started getting a few little things like, first I went with Demi and Bizet, and then I got the Russian girls and Serenade, and then I got the Demis and Theme, and then I just started getting better and better and stronger. But I wasn't getting anything from him, really at all. And it was Meryl who said to me, because she became a bit of my mentor. Meryl Ashley. And so it was Meryl who said to me, we were doing the old Don Q, Mr. B's Don Q. And it was just he had given me, that's what happened. He had given me the Duchess in the set. So there I was, really, 19. Triple pirouettes and fouettes and taking 4 classes a day and really, working hard. And I'm doing the Duchess with Anthony Blum in the second, and people were saying, "Oh, it's because you could fit into the costume. Oh, it's because you're Cuban." I just thought, I'm walking, I'm just so. Yeah. So it was not a good end of winter season. And Meryl said, "Go and talk to him. Go and." So I think one of the smartest things that I did is that I went in, and what I said to him was, when am I going to dance like the principals, like your principals? Mm-hmm. When is that going to happen? And I didn't go in and I didn't ask for parts. Mm-hmm. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask why I wasn't dancing. I said, when is that going to happen? And he said something really interesting to me. He said, it's every day. You've got to go in there. You've got to do tendus. You've got to do jetés and higher jumps and lower jumps, higher leg, lower, faster, slower. He said, every day you've got to work and work and work and work and work. He said, and then one day you're going to wake up and you won't understand how you got there, but you'll have gotten there. And so I said, thank you very much. He didn't quite answer my question, but I get it. And then little by little, I started getting things from him.
Mm-hmm. Did you have specific dancers that you did admire when you're saying, when am I going to dance like the principals? Were there were so many icons of dance in the company at that moment. Were there some that in particular that you were?
I did. I loved Kay. Mm-hmm. I loved Patty. Mm-hmm. I had Miss Violette already. I didn't understand Karen's quality till much later in life, where I was already like a soloist and I would watch her do things. And then I went, I get it. Mm-hmm. I understand that. And also there were some beautiful, like Renee Estopignol, beautiful core dancers. Delia was also an interesting one for me to watch because she was so different in all these ballets. And it was also, it made me realize that there were these kind of solid, it made me understand what it was. In other words, you have these solid core dancers who just know the rep. They know that it's like the back of their hands. The curtain goes up and they get the ballet. They understand the ballet. And so that was very evident, during our time. So yes, in fact, at one point, I was backstage. I had not just gotten in. It was about 5 years or something. And I was watching and he said, "What are you doing here?" And Allegra was first. And he said, I said, "I'm just watching." He said, "No, go." He said, "Go out front." He said, "Go out front and watch and then come back and tell me what you saw." And he sent me several times to watch. He would say, watch, you know. So yes, there were dancers, and Suzanne obviously was one of them.
She was back by the time.
She was back. She had done her first, second movement by the time. Well, I think I was in for about 4 or 5 years maybe, and then that's when she came back. And of course we had, Suzanne's coming back, Suzanne,
right?
You know. But there were exciting times because he was still there, you know, very much working with the dancers. And it was, you know, you could tell how things just, you could tell why they were doing what they were doing, you know, what qualities they brought to these roles.
What was it like, some of these experiences working in the studio with him, having him coach and creating new works while you were also?
The works that he created that I was around, I was in the corps.
In the corps.
And so, you know, he was very, very nice. And it was sometimes hard to kind of tell because he wasn't demonstrating. So it was basically kind of showing, and you do the little steps. And but the dancers that had worked with him, like Renee and Delia and all that were around us, and Meryl and Bonnie and Elise, they were used to that. They were used to him, and so a lot of like the ballo, the Union Jack, those works that he did, even, you know, the Tchaikovsky Festival, the Ravel Festival. I just remember picking up a lot through watching my mate, you know, my friend next next
translated
to me.
for you.
Right, exactly. But he was very gentle. He was just very nice. He just never repeated things. He gave it, and then you just moved on. I mean, it was a very fast process. It was a very, very fast process. Unlike Jerry, which was a very slow, it was a very slow process.
Right. So what were some of the first big, you know, major roles that Balanchine let you have a...
The first one really was the trip we had in 81, the company went to Denmark, Paris, and Berlin. And I think we were there for 3 or 4 weeks total. And so I was called out of the blue. I was called to the Russian Girl in Serenade, Kay's part in violin, and Apollo, none of which I had learned or understudied.
It's happened all at once?
It's happened all at once in one tour. And I know. And so he never, I have to tell you, I mean, he came to a rehearsal, he walked into a rehearsal of Apollo with Maria and I, and he coached us in the variations in the finale. But it was this was not, he corrected to me, personally, to me, he corrected me more in class than he did in rehearsals. In class it was, what are you doing, the this and this and that. But in rehearsals it was very, very much like, you know, bend a little bit more here, travel a little bit more there. You know, you play on one deer, not on, you know, and stuff like that. And he never took a violin rehearsal.
And that's really interesting because you were the first person to do it after its originator. So did you feel like, okay, he trusts me and there's this level of confidence, or was it a little daunting?
No, it was a little bit like, I don't know what you're doing. It was weird. It was weird to me. So I was able to, I had learned the first 2 movements in Saratoga with Sally, because Kay was pregnant and she was in bed. She was bed rest. So I learned the first 2 movements, and then she taught me the pas de deux, but I never learned the finale. Right, the finale I had to learn on a video. So we get to, I think I had 1 or 2 rehearsals with Peter when we got to New York before we left. And then we get to Denmark, and it's an orchestra rehearsal. And we start rehearsing, and it's Bart and Karen, and there's Peter, but there's no Balanchine.
Right.
And we go through the whole thing, the 2 openings, the pas de deux, and he walks in towards the end of the finale.
Oh, no.
And, you know, sits in his stool, and then we finish. I'm going like, what? So I went up to him and I said, after the rehearsal, I said, Mr. B, I have no idea what to do with this. I mean, and he said, no, dear, you know, just be Lourdes. And I walked away and I thought, well, that's not really very helpful, you know. And I really thought he was being, but he wasn't. He was serious. Right. He was saying, you know, physically he was probably saying, technically you can do this, you know, but what are you going to do with it? You figure it out. I'm not going to tell you. But that's just the way he was. And I think he had the right to be that way because these were his ballets, but I don't know that we have the right to do that anymore as the second, has the next generation.
This is what I want to talk about Jerry's coaching style as well, but this is something that is interesting because, Balanchine isn't around anymore, and you have to decide how you pass these things on. So it's not a coaching style you're choosing to emulate, this sort of mum.
I don't. I can't. I mean, these are his ballets, and if he felt that he didn't want to say anything, it was his total right not to tell you anything. He had his own ideas of what it was, and who am I to say no, mister, Yeah. So no, I don't. I feel that it's really important to pass down what those steps were, the musicality of those steps, the syncopation of those steps, the energy of those steps, what I think it was like based on what I remember, the generation that worked with him, what I remember. I think it's because that's how these ballets maintain. It's in the details. Yeah. It's in the details, whatever those details are, and everyone has different ideas of what they are. But whatever those details are is how these ballets, I think, stay relevant. If not, it's you're looking at it going, I don't get it. Well, you don't get it because it's not musical. You're not moving. You're not traveling. You're not bending. You're not this. You're not whatever it is.
Right. I think that some people may not realize the process as an audience member, the process we go through in the studio of there's this video from 1970s, there's a video from 1980s, arms are different, steps are different, it evolved. How do you, when there is a issue like that in the studio, a little bit of, we have one video with this, one video of this, how do you make the decision of what you want to see on stage and what you feel is the right way to represent that ballet?
Well, I think the mistakes on videos, at least the ones that I've witnessed here at Miami City Ballet, are really kind of minor. In other words, it's an arabesque versus an attitude. It's on 7 versus 9. Right. It's 3 steps versus 2. And so those I think are, to me, in a funny way, less important than, say, a variation that has a specific quality to it, and I mean now I'm kind of drawing a blank. Like Bizet, every single movement in Bizet has to be different, has to look different. You cannot dance it the same because though it's the same composer, it's a different relationship to the music. So it's a little bit more of that kind of a little bit deeper information than. Yeah. Then there's some ballets like, the energy of symphony in 3 movements can't change. Fortes is an interesting one for me because Fortes, it is so, and maybe I'm just talking all over the place. So it's really,
I love it.
Going.
Yeah.
it's on a case by case basis, but I have, Fortes is architecture on stage for me. And unless you hit those kind of very angular positions, where you don't move the elbow, it doesn't translate it, and unless it's a real, so certain.
All ballets are different.
All ballets are different.
But it makes so much sense because I think sometimes it's easy for us to get bogged down on where's the head, where's the arm, and going through those videos. But really,
different flavor to each thing.
What really translates is the energy and the way it's interpreted in general, not even just the little details.
I do think that I'm starting to realize that more and more, and I didn't quite really believe it before. Well, I did, but not as much as I do now. You have to be trained in the style, the aesthetic, and the technique of whatever that Balanchine is, meaning the speed and the clarity. You have to be trained in that because then it just gets muddled. These things just, and that's hard because some people, because you're doing Balanchine, everyone's doing Balanchine, so you kind of feel, well, I can do Balanchine. Well, yeah, but you're not really doing Balanchine.
Right.
Well, I think that's interesting. That circles back to what you were saying before, is that he was more, I get not hands-on, but he would speak more about during class.
Yeah.
So he might have felt comfortable being less vocal in the rehearsals because he was there with you every day in class.
Probably. And
that's why you feel like
people say also, Michael, that it had to do with English. It wasn't a comfortable, even after so many years. It was still a third language for him, versus French and Russian. But I think it had to do with his view, his love of steps and his love of the vocabulary. So a fifth position, like he would say in class, look at Peter Martin's, that's a fifth, because he loved the turnout and the point of feet and the stretch knees. And, he just loved what that step looked like. And so that is what he was on people for in class, that clarity of these steps or the speed or the look of them. And then by the time we got into rehearsal, it was, well, I just want to see you dance. You've done your ABCs.
Right.
What are you gonna do with it?
That follows along with him being very speedy in rehearsals. There's no time probably for him to dilly-dally on that.
Yeah.
He spends the time in class. Yeah.
Right.
Makes sense.
So let's talk about Jerry Robbins for a little, who had an entirely different coaching style and did give you that sort of information. And obviously, Jerry was very fond of you. When did you start to work with him? What were some of the first roles that he gave you that you got to kind of delve into the deeper life of those ballets?
I started working, Jerry started using me for his core ballets actually pretty quickly when I got in. I don't know why, but I was doing Dybbuk and I was doing this. I was, he was throwing me into things. One of the first things that I worked on with Jerry was interplay, was a pas de deux and interplay. I did one of the Fouetté girls one year, and then he moved me to the pas de deux girl the next year. Jerry and I always had, we had a few moments of, during the West Side, there was a few moments of tension, few months of tension. But Jerry and I always got along. He was always really, I know he was difficult, but he was very respectful with me. Strong and strict and not, but not, I never felt, I was never scared to go into a rehearsal. That I know people talk about being terrified to walk into a studio. That was not my experience with Jerry, though I did see him. I was there when other people were the victim of that.
Right.
And Jerry was, it was just a wonderful time to be at City Ballet at that point, because you had two geniuses and you understood that these guys were you were in a place that was constantly creating. We were constantly creating new stuff, and so you understood the level of their genius, of their capacity, but they were so totally different. They were just so totally. Here's one person that's telling you in classroom exactly how to dance. In the rehearsal, he's leaving you alone. Then versus to the other one that is giving you every single piece of information. How to do it, when to do it, why to do it. And so you had to kind of, in that in his parameters, had to figure out, kind of who you were. So it was, I just feel that generation that was there, it's like we were like fully evolved, we could kind of do it. We could kind of do it all. Yeah.
Was there a way you preferred to work, or did you needed both?
I don't think I only knew both. I only, I can say I only knew, it didn't, one didn't.
You had both.
I had both. It was, I had both. I didn't,
Yeah.
I have to tell you honestly, I didn't. Some other people might have thought about it. I didn't. I didn't. I remember the very first, when Jerry brought Fancy Free for the first time to City Ballet, right? It was only at Ballet Theater. And, our first rehearsal was sitting, all of us, there was Peter Martin's. See, we were all sitting down, listening to what life in New York was during World War II. That's what it was like.
Yeah.
And that was our first rehearsal.
That was the whole rehearsal.
That was the whole
No
rehearsal.
dancing, just starting to get into the life of it.
Exactly.
Right.
Just sit down, and this is who you are, and these are your characters, and this is what it was like, and this is what shore leave meant. And, it was a little bit like, and then you just kind of got into it because he had a very theatrical, it was all about a narrative for him.
Yeah. So in 1981, you were promoted to soloist by Balanchine, one of the last people to be promoted by him. What did that mean to you to have that moment with him?
Well, he doesn't tell you. It's the
We've heard this.
So it was still happening that late.
Even then?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like it was the whole
like your paycheck change.
It's
That's
like a
we've heard
paycheck
things.
change, exactly. And it was sort of like this kind of routine thing. And so it was the Pat Avedon, who was our general manager at the time, just came up to me and she said, and actually gave me a paycheck and said, just by the way, you're, Mr. B just promoted you to soloist. And so It was kind of emotional because I was dancing a lot, and I knew that I was dancing well, but it wasn't, I didn't look at stages that way. Mm-hmm. But I did, it was during Nutcracker, and I did run up to him, and I said, I just said, Mr. Balanchine, I just want to thank you so much for promoting me, and I just never, and he looked at me and he said, dear, why are you thanking me? You did the work. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really interesting for him to say, which is, it's a very much like, it's an individual thing.
Right.
There's nobody, you did it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
No one's going to take credit for where you are today. And he was saying, I'm not going to take credit for where you are today. You should take credit for where you are today.
Yeah, it really, there must be a reason why he did that. It seems very, like now that you're telling us that story, that feels like very purposeful that he didn't have these big conversations. Because you said you didn't really think about the ranks. Maybe that's why.
I think it's because he felt it was an individual thing. I think he felt that everybody could, if they wanted to, everybody could. It's just a matter of focus and whatever it took. And it wasn't him, mm-hmm. and it wasn't this. It was you. Mm-hmm. Only you can make it happen. Right. I think that's maybe what he meant.
Yeah.
So Balanchine passed away just 2 years later. How did that affect your career personally, and then the company at large?
A lot. I mean, it affected me a lot. I'm not going to cry about it, but I still feel that he died way too soon for me. Way too soon. Because I was just starting to get things, and I think he.
Oh, it's okay. Everyone cries on our podcast.
It's okay. It doesn't worry. I don't mind people knowing this, but I think he was just trying to get me as a dancer, and kind of like what I was and what I was doing and where I could go and where I couldn't go. And I felt very comfortable around that. I felt like I could trust him. And so he died, actually. He was like the last 3 months, he just kind of was in the hospital, and we weren't hearing that much about it. And then all of a sudden he was gone. It was a very hard next couple of years for that company, because we ended up with, while he was, people had issues with Mr. B. He wasn't a saint at all. He was a human being, but there was a kind of sense that he was taking care of you, that he was aware of you, that, he didn't avoid you. Mm-hmm. He didn't avoid, conversations with you, and he was very human in that respect. And also there was a sense of hope. If you didn't get it, you're going to get it next season, and, and all of that kind of disappeared really overnight. And we were like a little bit, how is this going to work? Peter was very different. It was a very different kind of authority, very different kind of mentorship, if you want to even use that word. And
you were all his contemporaries too.
We were all his contemporaries, right? And it was also new for Peter. Right. I mean, he'd never been. I mean, I think that's what people forget, that Peter also lost his father with Mr. B. As the loss that we felt was Peter's as well, and he all of a sudden had these huge shoes and company and. Dealing with Jerry. And so it's a time that when I think back on it is a little bit of a fog for me, and Peter was very generous with me. I mean, he promoted me to principal. He gave me a lot to dance. But it just never quite felt the same. It just never quite felt that there was someone that was watching over me. That's all.
But you obviously you got promoted to principal. You danced for more than a decade after. How did you get the fog to sort of lift? Was it just time, or was there a personal process that you went through?
I think it was just time. I mean, I probably could have used, a coach. And I think this is why I love the studio process so much here at Miami City Ballet, because I myself felt that I'd walk into a studio and I'd kind of look around and, I go, so it's me and the pianist, and these steps, and there wasn't someone that I felt was really, come on, Lourdes, let's get you to the next level.
Right.
Nobody was doing that.
Right.
Nobody was getting Lourdes, and so I felt that I needed that, and so I think I was tenacious. I think I was just tenacious in trying to figure out, and. I would watch a lot, and I remembered what it looked like and what it was supposed to look like, and but they were hard years.
How did your promotion happen to principal? Did you get a paycheck raise too that time?
That's exactly the same way. Yeah. They just came up to you and they just said, you're promoted.
Keep the tradition alive. So we've talked about retirement a lot on this podcast as we have just retired. So how did you make that decision that it was time for you to stop dancing and move on to something else? And what was that initial transition period like for you?
I watched a few before me struggle with that. And, beautiful male and female, beautiful dancers that, that it's very difficult to stop because it's so much what that defines you. I think a couple of things happened with me. Number one, I'd been married and divorced, and I'd had a child, and I'd gone to school. So there was a real sense somewhere in the back of my mind that there was another Lourdes, right. that this just wasn't just this, that there was. So I think that happened. And I'd gotten into the habit, certainly after Mr. B died, I'd gotten into the habit of saying, are you in the right place at the right time? And I remember the last time I asked myself that we were on stage in 1993 with the Balanchine celebration, and everybody, it was the last day, and I said to myself, am I in the right place at the right time? And I thought, yes, I still am. Right. I'm still, it's still. And then, a few years later, I just wasn't. I just wasn't. And then I thought, I've got to somehow systematically, because I am kind of very systematic, and I said, I have to plan my exit somehow, and I don't know how I'm going to do that. And then the the opportunity just appeared, which was this work with Channel 4, based on an outreach outreach program with Casita Maria with underprivileged children in the South Bronx that I did, and I got a medal, and I gave some remarks at this fundraising for this organization. The general manager from Channel 4 was there. He was interested in starting an arts segment on television on Sunday mornings. Would I be interested? And I just said, here's my ticket out. I said, I'll do it. And I didn't know anything about television, but I thought,
when you have something
that you've already been thinking about.
I've already been thinking about it, and it appeared, and I just went, I'm going to go with it, and that's what I did.
So what is that like for you? Because we talk about that too. Like, we were always dancers, and now we just talk all the time. So how was that for you to kind of make that shift too in the way you were expressing yourself?
It was not as hard as I thought, I have to tell you. Yeah. And in fact, Jock Soto came up to me at one point, and he said, did you go to therapy for this? Did you go see someone? Because I didn't. I think, Rebecca, it wasn't that I was done. I personally, I was fine with it. I danced more than I wanted. I danced with Balanchine and Jerry. I was done with it. And I wasn't done with the art form. Right. I was just done with the dancing on the stage. Right. And I never missed it. Maybe it's my own weirdness, but
you left at the right time.
Yeah. So what other avenues did you start to explore? You always knew you wanted to stay with ballet? Is that where you?
No, I didn't. I was a single mom, and I had to make a living, and and you do what you have to. Right. And so I did this television for 2 years, which I was not very happy doing. I just really I missed the community of dance. I miss, dancers have a very unique way that they communicate, that they hang, that they commune, their sense of humor, the way they look at life, the way they look at the world. It's very
abnormal.
It's unique.
Special.
I think it's special. It's unique, and not everybody has it. And I'm sure musicians are the same way, and opera singers are the same way. So dancers have their own little, and I just wasn't. I would walk in. Everybody said, "Oh my God, you're with Channel 4. You're getting a paycheck. You have insurance." And I would walk through the doors of what's it called, 50 Rock. I'd walk through the glass doors, and my whole DNA would change. Like everything that Lourdes was, I don't know how else to explain it. I just didn't like it. Yeah. And the industry was just not one that spoke to me. And then Francis Petrelli came up to me. We bumped into each other somewhere, and he said, they're looking for Ballet Academy. He's looking for a teacher to teach adult classes. Would you be interested? And I said yes. And I started teaching after I would finish the television thing. At night, I'd go and I was just happy. I mean, there were these, people that were not going to dance, but I was happy in it. I was happy, and then Julia said, start teaching for the school. And then I started to get more and more involved. And I spent about 4 years there, but again, not planned.
Right.
It's just the opportunity presented. And I said, I'm going to do this.
During those 2 years when you were doing television, were you taking bar? Were you doing any sort of ballet-related activity?
I think, you know what, Rebecca? I think that was part of it also because we're so used to those endorphins of taking class, of standing in first position and all of a sudden going, I'm centered. And I did miss it. And there was nothing there. That was hard. That was very hard.
So teaching probably.
Right. So exactly. And it wasn't, and I was so close enough to my career that I still kind of felt like I could do it, So I did that, Ballet Academy East, and it was great. I got, helped Darla with the syllabus and with the levels and auditions. And I worked with students and getting them, the ones that weren't dancing. It was really good because it kind of taught me to communicate, I think, in a positive way. If you're not going to dance professionally, how else can you contribute? It doesn't have to be on stage with a tutu and a crown and pink tights. There are many, many ways now in which the art form can use you, can use these individuals. So I did that, and then I was, happy and as a pig and you know what. And then Barbara Horgan approached me and said, we need, we're looking for an executive director for the Balanchine Foundation, and would you be interested? And I said, well, I don't even know what that means, But so what we decided is that I would shadow their existing executive director. I would for a summer to kind of understand, and those were 4 fascinating years for me. I mean, it was. I thank Barbara because she basically took someone again who didn't know and just said, "You figure it out," and the trust. Right. And years later, I would say, how did this happen? And she said to me, Mr. B always said, it's such it's such a unique community that you really want to get dancers to do the jobs that entail, that are about dance, because they're going to understand it. So at the Balanchine Foundation, it was really, it's where I learned about budgets and proposals and boards and governance and 501c3s and this whole world and I learned a lot about Mr. B because all these documents, and it was just all about his work. So all these, articles and documents and images and pictures and stories and stuff was available to me, for me to look into. Programming, why did he program in City Center? Why did he do that? How interesting that he would put, Swan Lake, pull you in, and then you had to sit through Fortes and Barocco and then Firebird, to kind of keep you. Right. It was, how he was thinking, or Lincoln, maybe it was Lincoln, I don't know. But it was there, it brought me really close, and I learned a lot about him and New York City Ballet and that whole history.
For our listeners who might not be aware of the difference between the trust and the foundation, can we talk about that a little bit? Sure. And what your work was specifically at the foundation? So
the George Balanchine Trust is the entity that licenses his works, his ballets, and that oversees the artistic and the aesthetic levels, or standards of his works. The foundation is an organization that is primarily focused on preserving his works, meaning through video archives and through conversations with the original interpreters of his works, and also looking at other aspects of what Balanchine did, the Broadway years, the television years, other works that weren't necessarily for the stage. Right. So with the Balanchine Foundation, it was really about raising money to be able to kind of study and do the scholarship behind behind his works. Who he was, what do these scores mean? How we can preserve that.
Right.
Was that particularly gratifying for you to be, after having been removed, working for Channel 4, and then now you're back and you're doing work preserving something you committed your life to before.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't. I didn't even plan it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even plan it. But I left. I walked out. Because I didn't tell anybody that I was leaving City Ballet. I just, we were supposed to do a South American tour, and I called the company, the general manager, and I just, I said, I'm not. I've just decided that I'm stopping. I'm not going to come back.
Did you have a final performance?
I didn't tell anybody.
Wow.
I told my family. And that was it. After Brandenburg was my last performance.
But you knew, like in your heart, this
I
was
knew
my
it was.
last.
Yeah, I knew, and I told,
like
and I think Nikolai knew because Nikolai was the last thing that I did with him. It was my last performance. So Nikolai knew, and I think he might have told a few people, but no. And so I just kind of walked away, and how it was 5 years later, I'm plucked back into the world of, and so it was very gratifying. I felt like I was home in a funny way.
You got replucked again. I got replucked in 2012, coming back home when you came to Miami with Miami City Ballet. How did that job offer come about, and what made you eager to accept it?
That was Bob Gottlieb, who is a dear, dear friend, a mentor, Robert.
Oh, we've had him on.
Oh, yeah, then you know.
Yeah.
And I had known Bob for years at, the early years at New York City Ballet, because he was around doing, I don't know what he was doing. We knew of him, but I had if you told me then, what does Robert Gottlieb do, I'd be clueless. Right? But he was always around. He was just someone that we knew.
Right.
And then I got to really know him at the Balanchine Foundation. And we somehow became friends through this whole art history that I have this interest of. And so Bob was when he was in New York, he would meet with me and he would say, we're trying to figure out what's with Miami City Ballet, because Edward is leaving, and there are these problems, there's this and that, and we don't know, and it's a Balanchine. So he would, do you think this person, do you think that person, what have you heard of this? And so we would have these conversations. And then one day where I think it's like January, and it's like hot, we had this diner that he likes to go to on the East Side, and he said, and he just looked, we were having the conversation again, and he just looked at me and he said, and by this time I was with Morphoses, but Chris had left. So it was my second year of Morphoses. And so he looked at me and he went, oh, what about you? And it was a little bit like, what about, and he said, yeah, what about you for Miami City Ballet? And I just, I stood there and I went, well, I mean, I've never done it. He said, but you know these ballets, you know Balanchine, you know the legacy, you know this, you know that.
You've done so much work on the executive side of things by that
right,
point.
and that's what he said. And you went to Russia and you brought and all of this. And I remember saying, I remember thinking to myself, my God, you've said yes to every opportunity in the world. You just. So I said, I have to just think about this. I said, because it's a lot, and it means moving my family down, and and then I went home and I spoke to George, and George said, how do you feel about this? And I said, well, you know what? It kind of feels organic to me because it's where I was raised. I speak the language. I know the Balanchine works. I said, I know a school. I said, what I don't know is an artistic director. What does that mean? I mean, I can teach, I can coach, but what does that mean? What else does it mean? And so I think it was like a week later, 6 days later, I went back to Bob and we had a long conversation. What is it? What is the job? And then I said, okay. I said, let's go for it.
So once accepting the job, what were some of the first positive changes that you sought to implement at the company at Miami City Ballet?
I think, Michael, with all due respect, it was a very, to all of you that were there, and obviously to Edward, who's really a genius in respect to what he started. I mean, to think that Miami City Ballet in a school was started in basically what was then a wasteland, and that it was also, you think about it, it was the Balanchine legacy. So it's not like he walked in and said, we're going to do Swan Lake and Corsair and Flames of Paris. Right. He walked in with a very cultured, highbrow, really of an aesthetic and a legacy and a rep that not many at that time in South Florida were even aware of, frankly. Totally. Right. Yeah. So it could not have been easy, but and it was such a traumatic, I mean, I think we can talk about it now, honestly. It was such a mess It was just such a hot mess.
You came in overnight.
I came in overnight. It was such a hot mess. But I came in understanding that you guys had all been there and that I was a new one on the kit. I was a new kid on the block.
You also hadn't programmed that season, that you came into a season already.
That helped tremendously.
Did it help? Okay.
Yes, that helped tremendously because I didn't have to program. I didn't change anything of Edwards. It allowed me a year, a season to kind of look around and suss it out and get my own feet kind of planted on the ground.
Right.
So it was a little bit about, how do I get them to trust me and how do I get them to understand I'm not going to fire everybody, that's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in actually making it a better company, rising it to the next level. And I didn't know what that next level was. I had no idea. And so for me, that means the work. Let's go into the studio and start working, which is what I've always known with Balanchine and Jerry. It's the work. We're going to go in and figure this out. And I have to say, you guys were very receptive. There were very few, in respect to the dancers, there were very few that were resistant to that. And then the ones that were, we know who they were the ones that were, it was a little bit like, I'm here to give you everything that was taught to me. Take it or leave it. I'm not, this is, I feel like I want to feel good about myself. And this is my job at this point. But then what I realized as I looked at the rep is I thought, there's so many ballets that haven't been done. So many, not so many, but there were, that I thought, they could really do it. And if you bring those ballets, the dancers get I know this from my own dancing. You get excited.
Of course, yeah.
You're like, oh my God, I'm going to be in that class. I'm going to be front center. I'm going to work because you want to be in those ballets. And then those ballets make you better. And then it's like this, and then audiences start to come in because they start to say, oh my God, look how they're dancing, because you're excited. And so then they come, and so it's like this vicious circle that kind of feeds itself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so the hard thing for me was I'm not a choreographer. It would be easy if I could create, right? But I'm not a there's a very interesting book, and it's called I think it's called Brava, which is the biography of Lucia Chase. Is it called? I don't
know the name of it, but
by her.
We're going to look it up.
We'll look it up.
You should look it up by her son. And it talks, it's a fabulous book. It's a fabulous, because it talks about those early years, how Mr. B and Lincoln basically said, we'll take the State Theater, we'll take City Center. And Lucia said, no, I'm going to be at the Met. And so because they were at City Center, then Morton Baum came and said, let's move you guys over to the State Theater. Right. And so the son talks about a meeting that they had just had at ABT, where the mother gave like $500,000 of the family's money because they had to put Swan Lake with Macarba. They were losing money and all those. And he says, I'll remember this. He said, and I walked across the plaza, and I looked over at New York City Ballet, and I thought to myself, they've already presented 6 brand new ballets. And I thought that was because of Balanchine and Jerry. So it's the new thing.
Right.
It's what gets, and so I remembered that, and I said, okay, let's start to look at ballets that I can start to bring, A, for the dancers, and B, for the audience and for the board, and for me also, because it's kind of exciting to have people, come in and different stagers, different interpreters, Justin and Ratmansky and whoever else.
You were the first director outside of New York City Ballet to commission a work from Justin. What about Justin caught your eye? Why did you think I'm going to get in on the ground
Morphoses,
level?
When we were he sent at Morphoses and I think I still have it, a DVD of a piece that he did for the School of American Ballet to Mendelssohn's music, and I put it in, and I looked at this and I said, oh my God, this guy is talented. And it was a rehearsal of School of American Ballet. I don't know what that ballet is. You can ask him, but it was Mendelssohn. And he did it for the school or the choreographic, something like that. And I thought, oh my God, this guy, because you could just tell the musicality, the formations, it was inventive, it was different, the lineage was there, and that just kind of it just stuck in my head. It just stuck in my head, and I think he and I had spoken. I think he came to the Pontus's the last Morphoses rehearsal. He came with Tess, and we chatted a little bit, and then I thought, let me just I'm gonna do it. And then so New World Symphony approached me about doing about finding a choreographer to do something with one of their with their quartet, one of their quartets. It was Michael Tilson Thomas, and I emailed Justin and I said, so you got 9 days. This is your money. These are this is it. And he said yes. And that, when he was in the studio, I said, one of the reasons I want to do this is because once you get to know the dancers, I'd like to then commission you for a larger piece. And that's when he said to me, I remember this now, this conversation, he said, but I know these dancers. I went to SAB and he knew you and he knew that. I was like, he knew, so it wasn't, I thought I was bringing him in so he could get to know you guys. Little did I know he knew you. So that's how that started. Yeah.
I'm laughing at the idea of Justin Peck sending his videos places like, hire me. That doesn't happen anymore.
No, that does not happen anymore. That doesn't.
That's amazing.
So what were some of the biggest challenges? Maybe things that you weren't expecting. You expect that we're an arts organization, you have to deal with budgets and all of that. But what was something that came up that you had to kind of find your way with as an artistic director?
Oh my God, that's a tough question because I think there were just so many things. There was just and there continue to be a lot of things. I think it's a lot. It's like every day, every day is something different. Every day it's not, as a dancer, you walk in every day and it's your class. And then maybe you know that your body's going to hurt a little bit and maybe class is not so good. Maybe class is great. You can have a good, but it's more or less within this. An artistic director, it's everything from like, the plant in the kitchen died and do we get rid of the pot to we can't make payroll. I mean, so you have to, I think one of the things that I taught myself is just to stay calm and not get too worked up about stuff that happens. I can't, if we don't have any Kleenex or toilet paper in the bathroom, I can't deal with it at the same level as I have fought for dancers who are out or, we have to cancel something. So I think what I'm saying, Michael, is that you have to walk in and you just have to, deal with what there's a funny story I always tell about Mr. B, and it was our first trip to Paris at the company. We were there for 3 weeks dancing, and we were opening with Jules, and I was in the corps, and we came in and everybody was running around. I mean, something was going on that very first day, and I walked out and I see Mr. B calmly walking with Karen, just be at the theater, just walking, but everyone else is like, and it's a nightmare. It's panic, and I don't know what it is. And then I find out that the orchestra, the French orchestra. Do you know this story?
No, I feel like you maybe told us.
Yeah,
it's not.
Keep going.
The orchestra that was supposed to play for that they went on strike. That they weren't going to play that, and that's what everybody was freaking out. And then I find out that Mr. B said, no, not a problem, dear. We'll have Gordon and Jerry we'll have Richard Murdoch and Gordon do Emeralds on the piano. Then we'll have Jerry and Gordon do Rubies. And then we'll have Richard and somebody else do Diamonds on the piano.
No problem.
No problem. And guess who was in the pit that night?
Who?
The orchestra. And I'll never forget. And he didn't get...
Why stress? You don't know the ending yet.
He didn't get stressed out. And here's another great story. This is what I all find out. This story I found out in reading at the Balanchine Foundation. So he, after many, many years, there was a thing between him and Serge Lafar because he really wanted to be the artistic director of Paris Opera, and they gave it to Serge. And he and Lafar never got along, supposedly. And so he finally gets invited back years later to create something for the Paris Opera. And he travels with Barbara Horgan, after the City Ballet season. Do you know this?
I love this story.
I haven't heard it.
You haven't heard it?
Okay. We haven't told it on the podcast.
Yeah.
So it's good.
So he travels to Paris and he gets there with Barbara and I think they arrange something like, your rehearsal starts at 11 or 12, whatever, and I'll meet you here, and we'll have, and then you'll go back, we'll have a lunch or something, and then you'll go back. And then he comes, she meets him, and, a few hours later, and he says, so tomorrow, dear, we leave, book the flight because we leave from Monte Carlo. And Barbara looked at him and said, but Mr. George, we're supposed to be here for 3 weeks. It's a ballet. He said, no, it's all done. It's finished. He said, so what had happened is that they had put him in the basement with the second company. He said, they're in the basement of the second company. They can't dance. So the simple ballet. And the ballet that he did was Walpurgis Nacht, which is why it's so simple.
Right.
It da-da-da-da-da. It's, it's little arm movements and saute pas de chat, saute pas de chat. And I thought to myself, it's such an interesting lesson because there was George Balanchine. He didn't go in saying, listen, this is who I am.
Right.
He was like, this is not my future. This is not this is not me. New York City Ballet is mine. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to get worked up. I did my job. I actually did it very well. When he brought it to City Ballet, he changed it. He put some hard things in it for us. But, and it was such an interesting lesson of him saying, there's nothing for me to prove here.
Mm-hmm. What's the story that we've heard about someone told it to us on the podcast, something going terrible, and Balanchine was just fixing someone's headpiece.
Meryl's tiara, right?
Meryl's tiara. Like everything was crazy, and he's like, I can control this right now.
Bob.
I can't control
Bob's
told us
that
that story.
Tchaikovsky piano concerto, the Tchaikovsky Festival, and the tubes had, and there was a smell that was intoxicating. Yes. People were nauseous. It was, you couldn't, and it was chaos, and one of them broke and shattered on the thing. I mean, it was just a nightmare, and he was fixing Meryl's Swan Lake tiara. Yeah. I mean, and so there was an interesting lesson. Anyway, so my point to answer your question is that I think and to this day, I struggle with that because my MO is to go like, to fix it. And I go, I have to kind of let it.
Yeah.
When you mentioned this earlier, it made me think of something. And so I'm circling back. When you came in and you were like, I needed to make everyone know I'm not going to fire everyone. Obviously, you came partially, at least, because you knew that this was a Balanchine-based company.
Right.
Would you have been open to going somewhere else, knowing that you had to work from the ground up, kind of?
No.
And you needed to have that base.
It felt right to me. It felt organic because it was a big step. It was, the company was a mess between the relationships and the board and this and that. So it was like Miami. I was raised. I speak the language. It's Balanchine. I know it. It just had it been
one more step.
Alaska. Juneau, Alaska. I would have said no.
Yeah.
I would have said I can't because I don't. It's not. And then there's a responsibility that I think, and I don't know why this is, that a lot of us feel for that legacy. Mm-hmm. That is very, very real. And I know people look at us and say, oh my God, you guys are crazy. But there is a responsibility of saying we have, we're here to pass it down for whoever wants it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's actually quite wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked a lot on our podcast about how being an artistic director is sort of like being in like the so-called president's club. Like nobody really knows what that job entails except for like the handful of you who do it. And often transitions or turnover happens in a little bit of turmoil, and it doesn't always happen that you can pass that knowledge on to the person coming in. So how do you feel like that could have helped you, and how do you feel like we can work as a whole to kind of pass on that knowledge for the future so future artistic directors don't feel that like
I think
scared feeling?
I tried to do that here, but I was unsuccessful. Mm-hmm. I was not successful. I think it's incredibly important, because to have an ally, to have a mentor in something that deals with people's lives and deals with an art form and deals with just a world that is not. It's not a world that you as dancers are really. The stage, but you don't know that the back. Things, the back offices. You don't know the back offices, and you're talking about a company that you have an institution that you want to keep it moving forward. Why choke it? Why do, there's, not that it's fragile, but it's so hard already to keep these companies afloat and happening and producing and successful and making money and sustainable. So, why destroy that? But I think it takes a tremendous amount of generosity. And then it also takes people that are around you saying, we will trust the person who's leaving to understand or to help the person who's coming in. And sometimes that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's not even the artistic director. Right. Sometimes it's the people around that say, no, right. You've made a choice to leave. It's, so it's going to take a village, for that to start to really happen.
Oh, right. Yeah. So you've already, you brought up obviously how important class was to Balanchine, and you always say it's very important to you as well. What is it about daily class, taking class every day, that you think helps define a dancer?
I think it's a lot of things. I think it's, you can tell I've thought about this a lot. I think it's number one, dancing. Let's look at it physically. It is not, our bodies weren't meant to do it. They weren't meant to do it. So the only way of maintaining that kind of physical integrity is through class every day. So that's number one. Number two, I think psychologically it prepares you for what you're about to do. It kind of centers you, and I've always felt that the hardest thing you do a day should be your class, that hour and a half, and that everything else should feel like a little bit of a piece of cake. So it's almost spiritual, where you just go in and you. And then when you think about it, think about how extraordinary this art form is, that the way that you stood at the bar your very first day in class, right, and learning those 4 or 5 positions with your left hand at the bar, is the way I'm still doing it at the age of 60 when I warm up and like to teach. I'm still going through those. It gives you the sense of being a servant. Right. That you're serving the art form. It's not the other way around. So all those things, I think, are really important. And Marika, Marika Molnar, have you ever done a podcast with her?
We've talked to her about it.
You really should.
You really trying to.
It's just timing.
We should BC when we're in New York.
When we're back.
Because she and I talk about a lot about this, and
she's a physical therapist for New York City Ballet.
For New York City Ballet, but she's more than that. She's someone who really took dance medicine and just evolved it, put it into the future when nobody was doing that. And she talks about the physiological changes that happen by a dancer just standing in first position and holding their backs and doing it. In other words, how your whole psyche, based on that, changes, and how your body starts to understand it from years ago. And so she and often she'll say, when dancers are feeling down, I ask them just to go and stand at the bar and do a very simple, just nothing, just simple tendus, little port de bras, just to somehow, because your body starts to understand what it used to do, and the endorphins kind of kick in. So there are a lot of things, that I just feel that it's critical. It teaches you, and it's where you work on yourself, and no one's judging you, and you can do a step 4 and 5 times. You can't do a variation 4 and 5 times on the stage, but you can do it in class, trying to get better.
Right.
Yeah. Gotta get in that first position. Maybe later today.
Yeah, that's inspiring.
Really
I'm like, maybe
even in your street shoes and your loafers.
Maybe that'll help today. So what are your continued goals that you have for Miami City Ballet?
I don't have any. People always ask me, what's your vision? What are you going to do? I don't have any. I think the art form should just do what it does. What I want are good dancers, right? And dedicated dancers, but, dancers that want to dance. I want a good rep. I want, wonderful theater. I want an orchestra. This is what a ballet company is supposed to do, and we will produce the work. But I can't say, oh, well, I envision, dancing in Mars, or I don't. It's like I get up every day and I go, no, what does it need? Okay, who's out there? What can I bring? What's going to work here? What ballet have it? I was talking today about Port and Sapir. I was thinking, maybe do you think it's stuff like that? It's not.
It comes to you.
It's because I think about it. It's like children. What do they need today? Is it broccoli? Did they have spinach yesterday? Is it broccoli today? Do I need to buy them clothes? Have they outgrown? Mm-hmm. I know it sounds horrible and people probably get very upset, but I don't. And maybe it's because I don't choreograph, that I don't have that thing,
Yeah, that makes sense.
You're more anchored in the present.
I'm more anchored in this is a company and it's going to produce great stuff that's important to be seen. And
it has to continue to move with the art form. That's another reason why
it has to continue, and it's one of the things I wanted for Miami City Ballet. I said I wanted to be a nationally recognized organization that's doing important work. Mm-hmm. Important work. So yes, we're going to maintain our Balanchine legacy and our Robbins legacy. All that is it's in our DNA, and I don't want to get rid of it because I believe in it. Mm-hmm. But it has to be doing important work for the ecology, for the future of the art form. So what does that mean? It doesn't always mean tutus and tiaras. It might mean something else, but it has to have a purpose.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you will be an awardee this year at the Dance Magazine Awards on December 3rd in New York City, which celebrates the most influential people in our world. So what does it mean to be recognized by such a prestigious organization like this?
I think, I'm going to, again, just be a little blunt. As a dancer, this award means a lot to me now. As a dancer, you kind of, not that you expect, but you would hope to get the Dance Magazine Award when you're dancing, right? And they you're up in videos, and you're doing this, and you're doing that. And then when Wendy called me, and I said, well, why am I getting it? I literally said, why am I getting it? But now it means more, because now what it means is really a lifetime that I've spent in dance. So it means so much more. It's not just what I did on the stage. It's what I've done afterwards of being involved. So it's so it has a deeper, more profound meaning to get the award now than if I had gotten it when I was a principal with New York City Ballet. And it's not to diminish those that had got it at all while they were dancing. It's not. It's only to say that for me, it's like, wow, I look back and I go, well, now I know why I'm getting it, I think.
Yeah. Well, we hope that all of our listeners in New York City will go and see you.
That would be great.
Get your award. We really wish we could be there.
And Misty is going to be
hosting, right?
She's
hosting and she's emceeing it.
That's going to be so fun.
Yeah, and it's It's Crystal Pite, who I adore, and Ronald K. Brown. Nigel is getting one. It's Michael Trosnovic from Paul Taylor.
Right.
So it's really an unbelievable.
It's a great crew.
It's a great crew. It's a great. I'm in good company.
So that brings us to our last. Oh my gosh, an hour and 10 minutes already. It's just been so fun to chat with you. But this is our last little bit. We call it our lightning round. So we'll just give you one question, and you just answer with the first thing that comes to mind. It's not scary. Don't worry. Is there one role that got away while you were dancing that you wish you could have danced?
There's several roles that got away. There's several roles, yeah. And I think Scotch was one of them that I really always wanted to do, and I still. And Duo Contretemps was another one that I always wanted to do and never did. There are a few, but there aren't that many. There may be one or two more. Yeah. But they're really
pretty big rep. It would be hard to hit all the favorites.
Yeah. But I don't have. I really don't have any regrets, and I really don't. Yeah. I really don't.
So if you could come back to dancing tomorrow and dance only one ballet, what would it be?
Oh my God, Michael. I don't know. I think I'd have to say Second Act Swan Lake. I'd have to say, because it has so much of everything that I love. It has this, great music and narrative, steps, and it's just it's how I grew up with ballet. I mean, I know that I'm leaving out a lot of the Balanchine rep, and somebody would have said, "Well, don't you want to do?" But I think Swan Lake is it's at the heart of what this art form is all about.
Yeah. Is there a ballet that was created after you retired that you would have really liked to have danced in?
No, I can't. I haven't seen. I don't look at it that way, and I also don't look at ballets that I used to do with me in it. So no.
We understand that.
Yeah. I was just thinking that. I was like, but maybe I should ask myself that question. I guess.
Yeah. We're thinking the same thing sitting out in the audience. It's just like watching.
You're just watching.
Yeah, you're just watching. You're an audience member.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's really cool.
It's very nice.
Yeah, it is
very nice.
Yeah.
It's liberating.
Yeah.
What's your favorite correction to give in class?
Stand in fifth.
That's a good one.
Fifth. It's home base. It's my favorite correction.
Okay, sky's the limit. No budget. Is there a dream project that you have for Miami City Ballet?
Well, we are hoping to make the dream project happen, Ratmansky's Swan Lake.
Yes.
So, I'm hoping for that. And that'll be 2020 if it happens. And then I also want to do a Sleeping Beauty, find someone that can I just think it's we all know the history of Sleeping Beauty and that score, but also it's this ballet that just has so much dancing in it. I mean, it's a classical dancing and
Tchaikovsky. Can't go wrong with
Tchaikovsky and and then the classics are important to audiences.
Would you want to keep it classic, or would you want to like update it and make it like
I would want to update it.
Yeah.
I would want to update it. But I think that's that's harder, kind of the choreographer.
Right.
But
but it's important to do.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Lourdes.
No, this is my pleasure. Thank you so much.
So much fun. Thank you.
Every year, the Dance Magazine Awards bring stunning moments of artistry and poignant speeches from the awardees. This year, on December 3rd, Dance Magazine honors Lourdes Lopez, Crystal Pite, Michael Trusnovic, and Ronald K. Brown, while Misty Copeland will be welcoming the guests. In addition, 2 Harkness Promise Awards and the first ever Leadership Award will be given out as well. For tickets to this uplifting evening, go to dancemagazine.com and click on Dance Magazine Awards. The awards will be held at the Ailey Citigroup Theater in New York City.
Thank you for joining us this week. We are excited to announce that you can now listen to Conversations on Dance on Spotify, in addition to Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, or through our website at conversationsondancepod.com. Subscribe now to receive notifications of new episodes. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Conversations on Dance. See you next week.